And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis, and next to me, as always, is my beautiful co-host, Laraib, as we are super excited to break down week 13 of the NFL season, Laraib. Only 5 weeks remaining of this season, and a lot still left to go. But we're going to go ahead and talk about what happened this week. Some good games, some very surprising outcomes for the better or for the worse, but everything keeps on changing, Laraib. Teams who thought they were out of it a few weeks ago are right back into it. And maybe some teams who got comfortable are starting to slide. So we will get into everything. Laraib, do you want to talk about anything before we get into the picks?
No, let's just go ahead and jump right in. Let me rip off the
Let's go
Band-Aid.
ahead. Let's go ahead.
Thank you, Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, for losing on the road after being 6-point favorites against the Green Bay Packers. And that was a week right there. I mean, even when you picked Carolina over Tampa Bay, and that should have lost to the week, but no, Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs do not want to win football games anymore. And of course, your lock hits and mine doesn't, and that's the difference.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll get to this game, but shout out to the Lions. They did what we thought they were gonna do. It was Saints made a little close. They almost brought my emotions back into it. But then as an objective football fan, I tightened my head back on and I started rooting for the Lions again because I'm an objective football fan. And we'll get into the Philly San Francisco game, but that was a huge victory. I almost predicted exactly, but we'll get into that one soon. But first, Laraib, let's go ahead and talk about our Monday night football game last night. The Jaguars and the Bengals. And the big thing going into the game was, no Joe Burrow. Jaguars were 10-point favorites at home by the time the game started. But Jake Browning and the Bengals go into Jacksonville and defeat the Jaguars in overtime, 34-31, Laraib. Obviously the biggest thing to take away from this game was Trevor Lawrence going down into a high ankle sprain. Now, at the moment, it seemed a lot worse. It looked like maybe a knee injury or potentially an Achilles or some type of season-ending injury. But the good news is they are saying high ankle, and Trevor Lawrence is questionable to play in next week's contest, Laura. So after last night's game in totality, how worried are you as a Jaguars fan, or if you were a Jaguars fan, going into this Tuesday today?
I would be very worried, Lewis. Of course, your franchise quarterback has a high ankle sprain, and you and I both know what that means. That's just one of the worst lingering injuries like anybody can have. And what's really more concerning is that defense, right? Jake Browning goes in there in his second ever start, throws for 300 yards on this Jaguars secondary. And, you talk about some of the competition they're going to face when they get into the playoffs. In Tua, Patrick Mahomes, I mean, we'll see. We'll see about that. The Ravens and Lamar Jackson. And so, it's a lot of cause for concern on the defense side of the ball, especially when they weren't generating a lot of pressure. They weren't even stopping the run, if I'm being honest. Joe Mixon had himself a great night, and they weren't stopping the pass at all. So I think that's a huge cause for concern. And especially dropping this game that would have vaulted them to the number 1 seed in the AFC Lewis. And now, they're not going to have any hard time winning their division. Well, maybe they will with this Texans team.
I don't
only
know.
a game behind, and now with Trevor Lawrence injured. But I think, it's going to be a climb for them to get back into the playoffs or to hold their reins on the playoffs. And then depending on how long this injury is for Trevor Lawrence, we'll see how it goes from there.
Yeah, I mean, first off, I really quickly want to shout out the Bengals because, after losing Joe Burrow, it seemed like their season was over, and it still pretty much is over. But, hey, shout out Jake Browning with an awesome game last night. Super high completion percentage, just overall super clean game outside of he did throw an interception, correct? Or was that?
That was Tyler Boyd.
That was Tyler Boyd who threw the only interception of the game. So despite, the Jaguars defense getting a few turnovers or getting a turnover and positive field position and having control for most of the game, once they lost Trevor Lawrence, and immediately followed it up with a missed field goal that just took all the air out of the building. Bengals come down, tie it up, go to overtime. it just felt like they weren't going to come back and win this game. It just felt like the Bengals really, that defense was starting to hum, and they took away the run game for the Jaguars, and that's the thing that's concerning to me, because when they were so good early on in the season, they relied a lot on ETN and his rushing prowess. They were getting a ton of rushing production, a lot of touchdown production from the run game, and it seems like, maybe it was just the Bengals defense is a bad matchup for them in the front. They have a really good front four or front seven for the Bengals, and they just hard running against this team. But, December football comes, you're going to be playing stout run defenses, especially in that AFC, some of those AFC North teams. How are you going to beat them with the pass? And now Trevor Lawrence hobbled. You're right, Laraib. This is the very low-key kiss of death as the high ankle sprain, because you never know how severe it's going to be. We saw Patrick Mahomes play through it en route to winning a Super Bowl. But is Trevor Lawrence made of the same ilk, or is he more of a Michael Thomas, Christian McCaffrey, in which it almost took away 2 years of their career? So we'll see how this affects Jacksonville going forward. Overall, the defense really not looking great, and the shakiness of their offense. A lot of question marks going ahead, Laura, but I will tell you the remainder of their schedule is manageable. They play at Cleveland next week, who has been reeling recently. Then they they host the Ravens. They have Tampa, Carolina, at Tennessee. So get through that Ravens game. I think you can still get to 11, 12 wins on the season and secure your division. But you can't get complacent because, the Colts and the Texans are both only one game out of that top spot. You don't think you'd be saying the Colts right now. And if you did tell me, it's like, oh, wow, Anthony Richardson's having a really good season, right? No, it's Gardner Minshew and Shane Steichen. Remember that name. But yeah, I thought that Jacksonville would have this thing locked up, but this thing, got to keep playing the games, got to keep seeing how things go, because they are changing all the time, Laraib. Anything else you want to take away from this Monday Night Football game?
No.
All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about our first big topic from the week. We have the San Francisco 49ers dominating another great team in the Philadelphia Eagles, going to Philadelphia, beating them 42-19, Laraib. Now, if you went back to our predictions episode, when we were talking about this game, I said there are only 3 options for this game to go. The 49ers to either, never really get a hold of this game, they get dominated, or they have a slight lead, but Jalen Hurts and the Eagles have they done all season. They come back and win in the end. Or the 49ers simply blow their doors off and give the Eagles their much-needed second loss of the year. And that's exactly what happened. The back end of this defense was getting obliterated by Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and Ayuk all night long. Meanwhile, the offense was just helter-skelter all night. They could not run the ball whatsoever. And then the passing game was just pretty inconsistent all night long. So now, Laraib, I want to ask you, after 2 dominating victories of a combined score of 84-29 against the Cowboys and the Eagles, are the 49ers the clear favorites to come out of the NFC now?
The clear favorites?
Because remember, you said Philly not only 1 week ago. You did.
I did say that?
Yeah, you did.
And I'm still agreeing with that, Lewis, because they are a better team than the San Francisco 49ers.
Good grammar.
And what is football all about? It's about the quarterback position. It's about Jalen Hurts being better than Brock Purdy. And when it comes playoff time, who's going to have the experience? I think it's going to be Jalen Hurts and this Eagles team who's been to the Super Bowl last year. Now, this does not look good for an Eagles team, which struggled, Lewis, but I think they were holding their cards close to their chest because they know when it comes playoff time, when it comes to NFC Championship time, they might be seeing this team, Lewis. Now, do I want to say they intentionally lost this game? No, that would be asinine to say. But to say they were keeping some of those trick plays, some of their more, something they could use for later down the road, I think that would be a safe assumption. Now, when we look at the schedules going forward for these 2 teams, the 49ers have a really easy schedule in Seattle, Arizona, home for Baltimore,
respect Seattle,
Washington, and the Rams. Meanwhile, the Eagles have to play Dallas, Seattle, Giants, Arizona, and Giants again. So they also have a really easy schedule, barring a loss to the Cowboys this week. And so who do I think is going to win the NFC? I think it's going to be Philly still, because they have a really easy schedule. And I think if these two teams match up again, I think they're going to have some more film on this Niners team, and they're really going to be fired up for that game.
Yeah, I think this all depends on how the seeding really shakes out, Laraib, because regardless if how we think things are going to go, let's say 49ers win out, right? And let's say Philly could even drop the game next week against the Cowboys. If all these teams have 3 losses, I think we can both agree that right now it seems like, at least, that Philly is going to still get the 1 seed in the NFC. And if they have the 1 seed, then I actually think San Francisco has a better path to winning this conference, because I think the Cowboys are better than the Eagles. I know they already lost to them this season, but I think the Cowboys have just been a much more complete team since that loss, even though the Eagles haven't, lost since that game either. But just the way, and we'll get into more Cowboy stuff, but what I'm framing this as is I think the Cowboys are a lock for the 5 seed. I think they'll finish as the 5, and then Philly's going to get the 1. Both teams will then have a first-round bye, because obviously Philly has a bye, and the Cowboys get to destroy the NFC South. So, I mean, unless an injury happens or something, that'll basically be like kind of a rest, not rest. It'll honestly be good for the Cowboys if they get some cardio the week before. And then the 49ers get to play some, lackadaisical NFC team, maybe the Packers, good story. Then they're going to go to the buzzsaw that the 49ers are and destroy them. But then the 49ers probably going to play the Lions, or maybe if the Lions are reeling, play another, weaker NFC team. Meanwhile, the Eagles and the Cowboys then have to duke it out for a huge game just to go to the NFC Championship. And I think Philly or San Fran will be there waiting for the victor on top of the mountain just to push them back off. I like San Francisco in that very specific scenario. If San Francisco gets the bye, then give me the Cowboys to win the NFC. I have the Eagles as 3rd and my contender power rankings right now over Philly. I think Jalen Hurts is not 100%. I saw how he was running against the 49ers. He's just not that elusive right now, it seems. We saw a play where he tried to get, rush for a first down later into that game, and he just got crumpled by 2 linebackers, and it was a really ugly looking tackle that he shook off and he got back up. But he hasn't seemed that fast this year. And I worry about that. And their defense got obliterated by the 49ers. I mean, we talked about Deebo Samuel said, all we need is Brock. And you might not trust Brock, Laraib, and I really don't trust him that much either. But what has he shown us besides that rough stretch earlier in the season for us not to believe him? He shows up huge against the best teams. Yes, he has the Avengers God Squad with him. And as long as they're there, he just has to be okay. And he has all these guys making all these huge plays for him. But credit to Brock that he has the processing ability. He has the intellect to process this Shanahan system and always get the ball on time, on target to the correct guy to make all these big plays. So I think that he does bring a lot. And we saw what Deebo Samuel said. If we had Brock in that NFC Championship, this would have been the outcome. And it's hard to argue that. So I think Brock is valuable to this team. Now, saying that he needs to prove it in the playoffs is valid, but if this is their game script against the 2 best teams of the NFC, Laraib, I don't see how they can lose.
Well, this is why we love football, because it's any given Sunday. This guy can turn into a pumpkin at any moment, Lewis, if you ask me. We already seen it earlier this season, and now when the heat really comes on him, we'll see what Shanahan has dialed up.
But Laraib, against the 2 best teams, he's played his best football. And that's the playoffs.
2 best teams, correct, but the 2 best defenses, I mean, has he really had
Eagles, Cowboys, are they not good defenses? Or at least fronts?
The Cowboys have a good front, and the Eagles certainly, but they're not the highlights of their defenses whenever these 2 teams played, right? It was that 49ers offensive line who just dominated them. And now, of course, you can
Are they not going to be there?
Are they? Yeah, exactly. So that same offensive line is going to be there later in the season. But I just got a feeling in my gut. Maybe I just hate the 49ers so much, or maybe there is something brewing in my belly about this 49ers implosion. Now, you haven't talked about how much you love this Dallas team who got exposed defensively by my Seattle Seahawks, but Dak Prescott on his MVP race this year, trying to win that award.
It was a trap game. They were getting ready for Philly next week. And we'll talk about that one in our next episode.
We'll definitely be talking about that one.
Mm-hmm.
But, that defense after playing lights out on Thanksgiving really didn't show up against the Seahawks last week. And now you expect them to be able to button down a team like the Eagles in a potential playoff matchup? I don't think so. You think they can button down a team like the 49ers offensively? I don't think so. I don't think anybody could do that, how they played this past week.
Well, Rob, let me ask you this. Out of the 3 quarterbacks on those teams, which one do you think has played the best season so far?
If you're asking me numbers wise,
I'm just asking you who's played the best this season. That's it.
It has to be Jalen Hurts, in my opinion.
What?
His rushing ability, Lewis.
Oh.
His ability to play through the injury, like you're talking about. The fact that he had a new offensive coordinator, a new offensive system to have to learn after going to the Super Bowl last season. I think he's been the most impressive, to be honest. And he doesn't have a defense like the Cowboys to carry him. He doesn't have a defense like the 49ers to carry him. They have a
it's the Philadelphia
defense.
Eagles.
They have a solid defense, Lewis, but he had to claw back against the Buffalo Bills at home earlier this season. The amount of games that they've had to climb back into on his back, on his legs, has to be him. And, of course, they have the most unstoppable play in the entire NFL, Lewis, with the Tush Brothers.
Right.
I think he's just been above these other 2 guys. Now you can.
They also have the best offensive line and the best receiver out of the 3 teams. Is that not given any credit?
They can most definitely get some credit, but he had to learn a whole new offensive system. This is not the Kyle Shanahan. He's running a slant, just throw it right
Dak
to him.
lost Kellen Moore.
And his head coach became the offensive coordinator, so it's not like somebody new came in. No, Go ahead and give me the case for someone else, Lewis.
I'm saying Dak. I think Dak has played the best football so far out of the 3 quarterbacks. I think he's been the most consistent, and he hasn't played that great of opponents. I'll give you that. And in the games he has, I think he outplayed Jalen Hurts when they played their first matchup, and he's getting hot at the right time. And I think these 3 guys are the top 3 in MVP odds right now. I think Dak goes out, wins MVP, and proves why he is the playoff winning quarterback later on. But we'll get to that.
Right, I'll give it to you that Dak will win the MVP. But you asked me who had the more impressive season on the different things they had to face on the caliber of opponents.
Why would you give Dak MVP then? Why not Jalen Hurts?
Because I'm talking about myself. What I know, what Jalen has been through personally.
So the
with
MVP
the new offensive coordinator, he has more impressive comeback wins. Dak Prescott got all the numbers for beating up on crappy teams. Their defense scores a lot of touchdowns for them as well. And so, of course, Dak Prescott gets to have inflated numbers. And, of course, he got to play on Thanksgiving and rout the Commanders in front of everybody. And, of course, they got to play on Thursday Night Football against my Seahawks and explode offensively against them. So, of course, they're going to give it to Dak Prescott. But I think Jalen Hurts has been the more impressive quarterback this year.
All right. Well, so far we disagree. But, a lot of things can change, as we will soon find out, with the Kansas City Chiefs, who dropped a Sunday Night Football game to fall to 4 losses on the season, Laraib. And, thinking about this game, they just never found the rhythm. And Laraib, it seemed like they were just thoroughly outplayed against a worse Packers team. And we'll get to the Packers later, but focusing on the Chiefs here, their offensive production compared to, through 13 games last season has been significantly worse up to this point. They have scored an entire touchdown less per game, and the yards per game are worse. Patrick Mahomes' stats are much worse entering this time, but the offense isn't that different. So what is so different about this offense to why they've taken such a, drop this season?
Well, Lewis, I think it might be the loss of Eric Bieniemy, their offensive coordinator who went to Washington this offseason. He could definitely be a big reason to that. And, just their skill positions now. I know they've had similar positions from last year, But, Travis Kelce got a year older. He also had an injury to start the season, Lewis, and he just hasn't looked the same, even with Taylor Swift in attendance for this one. He didn't go for 100, 150 and a touchdown. And so it looks like he might be starting to slow down a little bit. And it's not looking too good for this Chiefs team, Lewis. I know you think that if it doesn't go through Kansas City, they don't have as great of a chance, which I agree. But I think Patrick Mahomes on any given Sunday, as the phrase goes, he's obviously going to stay in a game with everybody. Maybe they just didn't get up for this one, Lewis, and especially that defense when they lost Drew Tranquil, their linebacker calling the plays. It kind of just wasn't the same for their defense either. And so we'll see for this team to try to get a little healthy, at least defensively, Lewis. And then, offensively, they're going to have to just figure something out.
And the thing is, Tranquil was their backup linebacker because Nick Bolton's already injured. So now they're down to a third string middle linebacker. And these guys, they will be back, which is a good thing. But the biggest thing for me, I mentioned the offense. You mentioned the skill position players. It just seems to be a big disconnect this year. Whether or not that is the different offensive coordinator, but you just, no one gave Bieniemy credit when he left, right? Because no one was giving him head coaching jobs. People were saying, it's Andy Reid, it's Mahomes, obviously. How easy is it to call plays? Well, apparently it's not that easy because they have been struggling. And even the protection, which was a, huge plus for them so far this season, they were, Mahomes under a lot of pressure. He got sacked 3 times against that Packers front, who they have a pretty solid front, but not like a game-wrecking front like some of the other teams in the NFL. So it was very shocking to see how inept they've been, over the past few weeks. We saw them drop 9 points against the Broncos, only put up 19 against the Eagles. They put up, 30 last week against the Raiders, and you think, okay, maybe this is something they can start building off of. But, then they drop this egg over here, and there's not a lot of leeway left because guess what? Next week you play the Buffalo Bills, who are desperate to get a win to stay in the playoff race. And if you lose that game, 5 wins is not winning you the 1 seed, and you're not getting a bye. So the playoffs will not go through the Arrowhead for the first time in Mahomes' career, which is just outstanding to say. But I think without that advantage, playing that extra game, just so much more room for error that they really need to avoid because of how, many weaknesses we've seen from this team. And it seems like more and more. They suffered a lot of injuries during that game too, Laraib. We saw Justin Reed go down. We saw L'Jarius Sneed take a hit. So they really need to start playing better football because, this one we saw them last year really turn things up. And it almost seems like they're regressing right now, Laraib. So that makes me want to ask the question. We talked about it a little bit last week, but who do you think will win the AFC 1 seed this year?
Well, Lewis, I think it's really lining up for the Miami Dolphins, if I'm being honest. They have a really easy schedule. Now, their last couple of games are kind of difficult. They still have to play the Ravens, I believe. They still have to play the Buffalo Bills once more. And so there's some cause for them to slip up. And, of course, the Ravens right there as well. And so those 2 teams are really the ones I feel have the potential to win it. Who deserves it? It's going to be the Ravens. I don't want to see this Dolphins team have a bye. I want to see them play somebody in the first week and get knocked out because they're really fraudulent, if I'm being quite frank about that team. And so I think the Ravens, they also have a great possibility of getting that 1 seed. Maybe it's going to be different for Lamar and the Ravens this year if the playoffs go through them. And we'll see what home field advantage looks like for the Ravens and Lamar Jackson over there in the AFC.
Yeah, it sounds pretty good. I'm picking the Ravens. I think the Ravens will win the 1 seed because I think they beat the Dolphins in that head-to-head matchup to basically secure the 1 seed. And it sucks because, if Trevor Lawrence doesn't go down last night and they find a way to win that game, they could be in a good position because the rest of their schedule really isn't that bad either to, maybe they go on a run, but that seems unlikely at this point. So it really is between those 3 teams, Miami, Baltimore, and Kansas City. And, I don't know if Kansas City wins next week. If they do, that'll be huge getting them past this point. But if they lose next week, that could be a huge hit to their potential chances, Laura. But let's flip it over to the other side of this game and talk about Green Bay, who, 2 weeks ago, they're 4-6. You look at the next 2 games, they have Lions and Chiefs back to back. It's looking like the season could go downhill very quickly. Jordan Love had been playing awful pretty much so far. But then win 2 games in a row. Jordan Love is looking really good in both games and standalone national TV games. Rob, do you think this Green Bay Packers team could make the playoffs?
Oh, most definitely, Lewis. you talk about some teams that are in there right now. I think my Seahawks have fallen out. Maybe the Rams are
Yeah.
in. They're also at 6-6. The Seahawks at 6-6. I think this is wide open for anybody to secure that seventh seed, Lewis. And especially when you look at this Packers schedule going forward, I believe they still have the Giants on there. They still have to play the Vikings on there, which, they're starting to slow down a little bit too. And so, they could very well make it into the playoffs. Now, the thing is, once you get that 7 seed, once you get that 6 seed, where you have to travel to play the San Francisco 49ers. So it may not mean nothing at all, but they have a really good shot, Lewis, to make it.
I think the big picture takeaway from this Packers team so far is you see that Jordan Love has a future as a franchise quarterback. For the last 2 games, you've seen him take steps to make that progression towards a potential franchise guy. Watching that game against the Lions, he was just hitting guys all over the field. And they've drafted some pretty, frisky, underrated gems with those, receivers. I like Dontavian Wicks as a physical in-between guy. Romeo Dobbs on the outside is great at the catch point. Christian Watson, just an athletic freak, even though he kind of got injured. And then you have a speedster in the middle and Jaden Reed. All these young guys kind of growing up and building with Jordan Love could be really good for this team coming in the future. He's getting a lot more comfortable within the offense. Matt LaFleur is getting more comfortable calling the plays with him. And, I think he's solidifying himself as the Packers starter next season. After a really shaky start, it was, you could see some of the talent. Like in the comeback against the Saints, he was making a lot of throws. He had the confidence going down. But it was like the first halves, they would always start off so slow and seemed like it was a lot of in his head. He was inaccurate. But now it seems he's playing with a lot more freedom and he's building confidence with these receivers, with this offensive line, and he's playing a lot better football, Laraib. So I think the biggest thing to take away, if you're a Green Bay fan, regardless of what happens this season, playoffs or not, if Jordan Love keeps up this level of play throughout the end of the year, this is a great sign for Green Bay and awful for the rest of the league who's been preying on their downfall. What do you think?
No, I definitely have to agree with you, but I still think that division goes through Detroit. Even if they weren't up for that Thanksgiving game, I still believe in Detroit more than I do in this Packers team. Now they do.
Oh, yeah, this season, I agree.
This season, for sure, yeah. And maybe next season, too.
Yeah.
As long as Jared Goff is over there, along with Ben Johnson. But I agree with you. There's a bright future in Green Bay with a really young quarterback and even younger, receiver pieces around him.
So you think that Jordan Love, it could be the franchise guy?
He's showing the signs to me, Lewis, but it's going to take more than, a couple of weeks here and there throughout the season to prove that. We'll see how they finish this last stretch, especially with a much easier schedule. And, they'll take it from there.
I think this win earned him next season. I think that's how important this win was for him and his confidence. I think it earned him next season at least. Or at least they're not going to be drafting his predecessor in the first round. But let's go ahead, and that'll do it for our big topics. Let's go ahead and move on to our Thursday night football game. We have the New England Patriots traveling to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh -6 at home. What are you doing on Thursday night, Laraib? You want to? The Pels are going to play in the in-season tournament in Vegas.
In-season tournament, guys. Yeah, that's going to be.
So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, football on New England Patriots at Steelers. Steelers -6. Oh, Lewis, wake up. We got football on.
Oh.
Steelers -6. Even after they got routed at home by the Arizona Cardinals. I pray there's a world where this Steelers team doesn't make the playoffs, Lewis. And it could start right here.
I hope.
The Patriots coming into dude, imagine this game like a couple years ago. Tom Brady coming in.
Oh my God. You got the triplets of the Steelers. Man.
The 3 Bs. I mean, that would be insane.
Did you see on the graphic promoting this game? It was TJ Watt, and then for the Patriots, it was Bill Belichick. How gross is that? And then Ramondre got injured too. Speaking of,
they should have put Zeke on there. Feed him. I think Zeke goes for a monster game in this one as the Steelers win 17-3.
Yeah, I'm going to lock up the Steelers actually for this game. Okay. Bill Belichick is going to get that call where it's, hey, Caleb Williams kind of likes Bill Belichick. I don't know why he would, but they're going to find a way to lose this game. They have no offensive identity at all. And if the Steelers lose this game, fire Mike Tomlin because that's how bad this freaking team is. But yeah, I'm going with the Steelers. I'm going to go Steelers 16-10. And I'm going to go 16-6 in this game. A lot of field goals.
A lot better from the Patriots offense.
Right. And I didn't want this game to be a push. All right, Laraib, well, that's going to do it for today's episode. A lot of cool things to talk about and a lot of awesome games to get into next week. So make sure you check out our next episode for our predictions for week 14, as a ton of crazy matchups are going down, including that Cowboys-Eagles game that we've been alluding to all episode long. Laraib, you got anything else before we head on out of here?
No, I think that's the First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.